We'll be discussing about asset investment planning and the capital projects overview. Like I said during my introduction, I would be looking at capital projects, where I also described a term called PPM, Portfolio Project Management, and Ann just touched on what PPM is. So I'll start off with a brief description of what an asset life cycle is here. The screen here, the chart here shows a typical asset life cycle where it all starts with building up a repository of an asset, which is called the asset register, where you have a lot of assets. City owns a lot of assets, different departments, assets belonging to different departments, assets located at various parts of the city with different conditions data. Assets probably ranging in from the beginning of their lifespan to their end of life cycle, which is when the asset is about to retire and needs to be replaced. So that's an asset register, which is a combination of multiple things, different conditions, data of the asset, where is it lying, what's the feature of that particular asset, which department does it belong, and things like that. So once we get all this information, we are feeding it into a new system that we would be building as part of IAM team. It's called Riva. So Riva is a tool that we'll be implementing as part of IAM, and the tool gets information about all of the assets that city owns. And once it gets that information about an asset, along with different attributes saying where does it lie, what's its, which department does it belong to, condition of that particular asset, life cycle, what stage of that asset is it, what's the cost of replacing an asset, when was it built, when was it put in service, all such data. What it does is it tries to look at the asset in a holistic way and tries to figure out when should this asset be worked on. When I say worked on, it could be either repaired, replaced, or refurbished. Depending on the information that we feed into the system and the calculation and the formula that we put in place in Riva, the tool, it kicks out information saying that on such and such a day or in such and such a year, you would have to perform some maintenance activity on it. And the maintenance activity could be either creating a project, where we do a CIP project for it, or by kicking in a notification and asking you to just go ahead and repair it, because it could be a minor repair that we would be talking about. So this tool has the capability for it to give us information depending on the information that we feed back into it. Right? We will be discussing a little more in detail about the information that we feed into it, but sticking on to this slide, this gives an overview of the process where the asset goes through, where you determine the target level of service, depending on what asset it is, whether it's a road, sidewalk, water treatment plant, it's a street light. What level of service does the asset require, and also the risk and criticality of a failure of that particular asset. When you feed all of this information, you balance out saying, should this asset be worked on this year, next year, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, all such things. And the cost of working on that particular asset is, are we talking about replacing that asset, repairing it, what sort of a repair, all of that things. Now, once Riva gets this information, we said Riva then gives us or suggests that you work on this particular asset. That asset information or working on that particular asset, that information is fed into another system called PPM, which is Portfolio Project Management, where a life cycle of a project starts. If Riva says that a particular asset has to be worked on and it needs a project for us to work, that information is fed into PPM. Go on to the next slide. Yeah. So this slide talks about the life cycle of a project, where it starts from initiation. We said the initiation starts in a system called Riva. Now here you have 4 systems that are talked on, which is Riva, PPM, project systems, which is PS, and P6, which is Primavera P6. The city currently owns or currently has 2 tools, which are PS and P6. People executing projects will be familiar with these 2 terms. One is project systems. It's already an existing tool that the city is working on. or is using for building projects and executing projects. We also have P6 where we perform scheduling of that particular project. We put in activities, we drill down to a little more detail. We schedule data in P6. This information is fed back into PS. But as a predecessor, we would be implementing these two tools called Riva and PPM, where you see the flow of data going in from these two systems into the existing systems that city has. Right? A little more in detail would be this slide, where it talks about what's the handoff between these two systems. So to give you a perspective of this, you would see a top portion of the slide. All of the top portion that you see here is all Riva. Onto the bottom right, you would see a grayed out box. That box is PPM. Everything in white here is the existing system or the existing landscape that is in the city, which is project systems and P6. Like I was talking about when I said Riva, Riva has information about all the assets that the city owns. Where does the asset lie, condition data. It also has new infrastructure needs list, like if the city wants to build new infrastructure, build new assets, all of this information is fed into Riva. Riva groups all this information and creates something called as a project proposal, where it says, for your year FY18 or FY19, you've got to work on this particular asset. Take this up as a project. I'm proposing this project over to you. Now, it's the city's team or the AMD, the people responsible, people working on Riva would then consider these and take these up as projects. Right? So once you take these up as projects, it goes into project portfolio management, where you determine where does this project lie, or which bucket, budget bucket, should the information or should the money be taken out of. Is it going to be from PUD? Is it going to be wastewater, water treatment plant, different divisions? Which division is the originator, or which division is the contributor of the budget for this particular project? Once that is determined, and once it goes through your approval, where you take it through your budget approval, your SIPRAC, your council approval, once the project is approved, you would then kick it off into project systems, which is the existing landscape. Now, in project systems, you execute the project. You would have vendors working on the particular project. You would post time charges. You would have costs put in onto the project. Goes through its life cycle, and at the end, you would see that it feeds into a fixed asset, where you go ahead and either repair that asset, replace it, or refine that particular asset with something else, like for like replacement, extending the lifespan of that particular asset by performing some actions. And this data, the work that we've done, is fed back into Riva, so that Riva now knows for this FSN number what was the new work that was done, and how long has the lifespan of this asset improved, or what's the new condition data that it should take to go ahead and calculate the risk score of not replacing the asset, or when should this asset be repaired in future. Right? The condition data and the technical asset data is what is called asset master data, which we feed back into Riva. So this is another topic that I will be taking you through the next slide. Any questions until here before we move further? No? Okay, let's go in. So the current challenges of the today and tomorrow world in the asset investment planning and the CIP projects, if I just take one of this, the department lacks a way to determine the right priority based on asset data. We manage a lot of assets. Different departments own different asset groups. Now, between one department to another, how do we determine whether an asset has got to be replaced or repaired? It's the AMD that take the decision. But for them to holistically look at what assets they manage and when should they be replaced, they need a placeholder for them to look at and analyze over the course of an asset, when should it be repaired, when should it be when should it be replaced. For them to do that, they don't have a right place. We do own different tools to do that, In future, it's going to be a new system that allows City to make decisions on when and what assets need to be worked on using consistent asset information. The types and condition of rating point 4 there. Okay. Moving on, I said we also feed data into Riva, which is the asset data management capability, where we need what asset is it, where does the asset lie, how is it performing, the current data, what's the life cycle of it, like is it at the end of its life cycle, even though the asset is behaving well or is at its optimum, is it nearing its lifespan where we could anticipate some trouble in future, for which we've got to plan a replacement next year. So all such information. So this information, like we discussed, need to be fed back into Riva for us to get a new project, or for it to propose new project. One of the things that we would be doing is ability to evaluate needs based on risk, value, and strategic criteria. That is, if the asset is close to its life cycle, where it's going to be ending in a few years, the risk of not replacing that asset is going to be higher. When we feed this information back into Riva, along with the calculations that we've put into that system, provides detail saying that such and such an asset is nearing its lifespan, go ahead and work on a project. So we currently do not have that information because we manage assets, different departments manage assets. There's no one place where we have all these assets coming in for us to take a decision. What are the different assets that we've got to be worked on? How many projects should be created? We currently create projects based on assets. We do grouping of assets depending on where they lie, but a holistic view of all the assets that we group together is not currently there. So we would be doing that in future. That's one of the things that Riva is capable of doing, proposing projects. We go on to the next slide. In interest of time, I'm just cutting this because we have work management and we have material management to be discussed as well. But if you have any questions, you could always ask. The current challenges, let me just read out one of this. Point 4, lack of analytics on asset conditions such as defect trends in order to systematically identify defects and their source. If we do not have a repository of assets, if we do not know what the condition of that asset is, and have a view or know when should the asset be replaced, we would not be able to perform or manage that asset well. Currently, it is a reactive situation where when an asset fails or when an asset is at the end of life cycle, we go ahead and replace it or repair it. But in future, it's going to be a predictive analytics that we'll be doing. We'll predict when that asset is going to be, when that asset needs replacement, whether it's going to be 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. And that's what these two tools do, where if you see, it's ability to capture detailed asset information to establish trends such as excessive use, faulty equipment, source of manufacture defects, and environmental requirements. Right. So based on all the considerations, based on all the factors that we feed into Riva, we would know when should this asset be replaced, how long does it take for us to do that, what's the cost of replacing an asset, should we be considering it as a SIP project this year, next year, and things like that. And if we consider it as a SIP project, it feeds into PPM, where we take it through its life cycle, and then feed that information back into the system, back into Riva. Okay, any questions?